Alright, so I'm Irina. I'm hoping to become a marine biologist someday, so I'm studying oceanology over in Baja California. And I have a real interest in just really weird animals and just how wild biology can get. And I have a particularly love for worms because really, if you look at a human, we're just a really complicated food. That's just the basic form of life, besides cells. And I happen to like the peanut worm particularly because I spotted it in one of the tanks at the Monterey Bay Aquarium when we visited one day. I just saw just a fat little oval in a hole minding its own business, and I just couldn't withhold my excitement. Go ahead.
You can tell she's definitely one of us. That's how we hit it off.
So these are the peanut worms. You can really notice their resemblance. Peanut.
Sorry, Paul's trying.
So these animals are nocturnal. They spend 16 hours asleep, so they don't get torn out of their holes by fish. But at night they'll come out and they won't come out of their holes, but they'll start feeding. They'll start extending their introvert, which is their mouth part is like if a glove was flipped inside out, and that was its natural position, and they extend it out, gather some food, whatever's on the sand or floating around, and turn it back into their bodies. Here, you can see why they're called peanut worms. You can really see their texture. And they're close cousins of the annelids, which you might know as the segmented worms, which include like earthworms and bobbard worms and all that. And it's actually been debated whether they're actually a different group of animal completely, but recently the genetic research has suggested that they're actually a subgroup of annelids instead of just being separate. And here's the general anatomy of the peanut worm. The introvert, as I mentioned, a lot of species will have tentacles within or outside of it to facilitate filter feeding and deposit feeding. And interesting is, you notice how the anus is right in the middle of the body instead of being at the other end? That's because they don't want to get out of their holes at all, because and they don't want to dirty up their little homes either. So the digestive tract goes down in a double helix, spiraling around itself, then starts going back up and ends right at the middle of their body. So as they're feeding, they can also just take the opportunity to just expel their body waste, not get dragged out of their holes. I was going to show a video, but there's no word. So there's a lot of different species. They have a worldwide range because of their simple lifestyle. They can be more sensitive to salinity, so they're more rare in some areas than others. For example, I think that they're more prevalent in Asia, but there's a good chance that you might find them somewhere here because they like to live in corals and really anything they can make a hole into. In fact, they can actually bore into solid stone when we have no idea how they can do that with their soft little bodies. And you can spot their mouth parts there, how they might scrape around for any organic particles, clean up the sand for us. How nice of them. And these animals are actually edible. They're very popular meals over in China, Vietnam, and the Philippines. They cook them up as jelly. They make a version of ceviche, which is using spiced vinegar. They dry them up and bother them. Thankfully, they're not getting, thankfully they're not facing the same fate as the cucumber, as the brown sea cucumber, thanks to mostly the smaller market and the they're more reclusive. They're much harder to take out of their homes, so they don't tend to get torn out. They tend to get depopulated less, but they're still becoming rarer because of overfishing, anyways. Mostly in the parts where they're popular as element. Okay, and also because they are a good source of profit for poor communities. But yeah, they're actually pretty nutritious. They're not just status symbols. So there's a lot of animals in the sea that we're gonna appreciate as food stuff other than the obvious fish and shrimp and stuff. So it makes you wonder what other sources of food we could find that aren't as, delicate and being overfished. I wonder what a farm with them would look like. And here's some 428 million year fossils of either a relative or the same species. Just like crocodiles and the coelacanth, they're the perfect life forms. They don't need to change at all. And here's some more fossils that shows the ridges of their bodies. And moving on to other animals, we have the sand dollars. I'm guessing you guys have seen their shells sold at shops or on the beach. That's called the test. And it's just their some bleached and spineless bodies. But I think they have more value in behaving alike. And in the family of echinoderms like starfish and the sea cucumbers that we talked about earlier. So these animals like to either live on top of the sand or halfway buried into it, depending on how strong water currents are. They are spread out nearly worldwide, and they don't, because they prefer more temperate waters. They don't like the Arctic that much. And you see the little ridges. That's where they breathe and exchange water from, this place right here is their anus. And they have little tubes on their spines. They're actually just like the sea urchins. They just have really, really tiny little spines, which rotate on their little ball and socket joints. Minuscule little spines. If you were to hold one, it just feels like someone's very gently rubbing a blanket on you. Again, I was going to show you a video, but it's mostly just about how it's just them slowly moving around with their little two feet, just taking the tiniest little hundreds of steps. And they're actually more mobile than you think, because when the sea currents pick up, they like to bury themselves halfway in colonies of hundreds. And this makes the life a lot easier because it makes it easier for them to reproduce, because they're broadcast spawners. They release their eggs and semen into the water to spawn by itself, and they leave the larvae to develop as plankton, and eventually when they're grown enough, go back to their sedentary lifestyle. And it also facilitates feeding, because they're also filter feeders. They just take whatever they can find in the water or in the sand. And if the sea current brings it to them, well, they use their fast food. Never fails them. And the way they use, and when that can't be relied upon, they use their tubes to search for food. The tiny little feet have tinier little feet on them, which carry them to their mouths. And they have five jaws inside their mouths that can grind up food for 15 minutes, and they tend to digest their meals for up to 2 days. And some of the younger specimens will actually swallow sand particles, so they don't get swept away by the sea currents.
No way.
Yep.
I'm learning so much.
And they prefer hematite, which is a type of a more metallic sand.
Really?
Yep. It's the little black specks you can see in the sand sometimes. It's magnetic as well. Scientists actually use their magnetic readings to see whether the sand particles have collected in their bodies. So they're also known as the sea cookies or sea biscuits. In Spanish, they're called galletas de mar. And they tend to live up to their name. They have strangely a lot of predators for something that is mostly bone and spines. So predators like flounders and their own countrymen, the starfish, will come devour them. And scientists have actually noticed that they can know when a big starfish has been passing through because there'll be a patch of buried sand dollars among a patch of unburied sand dollars because they've been digging under the sand to avoid the path of that particular predator. And you can actually notice how long they manage to avoid their terrifying foes because they start showing growth rings around their bodies. They'll develop. But when they're not quite that lucky, they have another strategy. When they're plankton, when they're diminutive, they're just little larvae, just freshly born, they have a strategy of cloning themselves whenever they sense the mucus of a predator. It's clearly not a fast evasive maneuver because it takes around like 24 hours for them to bud off an entire new member of their kind. But it helps out long term because now there's two smaller versions of the same animal floating around. So if one gets snapped up somehow, if they're noticed by the predator, then the other will survive as the exact same genetic individual. And I've heard that they hold a special meaning to some Christian communities because, for example, remember the 5 teeth I was mentioning? When they're broken out, when the shells are broken open and you lay out the little teeth out, they have little resemblance to doves. And the star pattern on their bodies, the one on the outside, I think, it resembles the poinsettia, those red Christmas flowers you see sometimes, and the underside resembles an Easter lily. And people make some comparisons to the stigmata with the holes in their bodies. And some communities like to give away sand dollars or little amulets shaped as sand dollars as a reminder of their faith with a little poem about it. You can notice here. And now for some more exciting animals. These are pistol shrimp. Oh, this one? You want to know what this one is called? This is called Sinalpias pink floydii. It's a recently discovered species.
It's actually pink floydii.
Yep, seriously. And these are quite the musical animals indeed. Oh, you see, this one is called the coral shrimp. This one is the species that's making noise in this area. And this one is called the bullseye shrimp. There's a lot of colorful ones.
What does it sound like when you're in the water and you hear them?
Have you guys ever had pop rocks? It sounds like that. That's the crackling noise you hear when you go swimming.
That's the noise you hear on the bottom of your boat when it's real quiet.
Yep.
You can hear them snapping.
Yeah, these particular little guys, just over on the side, smaller than my hand, really. Depends on the species, but most of them are much smaller. They're around like 5 centimeters or so. They're the cousins of crabs and lobsters, or fellow crustaceans, and they like to live in burrows, in the coral reefs or in seagrass flats, where they can hunt their prey. These guys are not filter feeders; they are in fact predators. These massive claws, which can be up to half their body size, have a very particular function.
I wish they would eat barnacles.
I wish so too. These guys can use them as their own personal little pistols by the sheer power of their snack. You can kind of see it here, but there's a gap in the claw here. And here's the hammer, essentially. And they can generate such pressure that it can, the force of the cavitation, which is vapor being formed instantly, is so strong that one, if provides a small flash of light, not visible to the human eye, but it's so strong that it makes light. It ranges at up to 218 decibels, which is about as loud as a jet engine. It superheats water to 4,700 degrees Celsius. To give you a comparison, 5,500 is the surface of the sun. What's it? Go ahead. The previous one? Yeah. Let's see if I missed it. No, I got most of it. Could you show this video? Did I see? Yeah, you don't want one of those. Okay, so here's a pistol shrimp. You see here? After an ad. Thank you, YouTube. How come they don't let you skip the longest ones? It's not fair.
I know, it is.
Yeah, sure, we'll be so glad to buy all this after tonight. It's just an unsuspecting little crab passing by the pistol shrimp. Is it likely to survive? How would you take bets on this? With some luck, it does. Despite the mighty firepower, it thankfully does get dispersed by the water fairly quickly. So it's not, a bomb going off by these tiny little animals. I wish this guy was talking right now.
You're doing better.
But he's gonna use this brush to incite it to attack, so you can see the cavitation bubble more clearly. He's gonna get it in slow motion so you can actually see it.
This must be incredibly slowed down.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
they have to do I think 1,000 images per second or something like that. But that's the cavitation bubble you saw right there.
Is this related to the mantis shrimp?
Oh yes, these are close relatives to the mantis shrimp. The mantis shrimp will actually do the same cavitation bubble with their attacks, but it will be at the point of impact. Just the same force, but manifested in a different way. And I actually want to show the part that shows the turbine making the same cavitation bubbles, so you can see just how strong it is against metal. So, right there? Yes. So, yeah, that's cavitation going on right there. That's a very fast propeller. And more sustained cavitation bubbles. But did you remember that pockmarked image of the turbine? That's what happens when something does that too much. It's an incredible impact. It cannot be sustained. There's just a limit on how fast the turbine can spin. Because if this keeps happening, it just eats into the metal. And this pistol shrimp can keep it up all day. Look, that's the turbine after spinning like that for a while.
Wow.
Just devoured by the power of the cavitation. Oh yeah, and remember the noise I was talking about? The little snaps? This actually cause a lot of trouble for sonar. The only animals that are louder than them are the sperm whales, which go up to 230 decibels. And they actually, I think if I remember correctly, they kill their prey with the impact of the vibration. They just shocks a quick squid into unalighting. But And here's a fun fact about some of these species. There's some species that like to live out their lives as if they were bees. So they'll have one queen shrimp, and there'll be a royal consort, and they'll be raising a family of hundreds of their offspring living together in sponges. And this female worker shrimp will protect the eggs, and the larger male shrimp will snap away at intruders into their little sponges. And just like the royal family, there's a lot of the pistol shrimp that are monogamous. They stay together for their whole reproductive cycle. And last but not least, there's a really interesting symbiotic relationship with goby fish. They will live in the same burrows. The pistol shrimp will, keep its burrow clean and make space for the both of them, and the goby shrimp will act as a lookout. But cavitation bubbles can only do so much when you're against fish 10 times your size. And look at all these different species living together. Don't you wish we could live in the same plane? And as we said at the end, we're just overdue for some sick company around this. They should have made some joke about this in SpongeBob. I don't know why I haven't done it. And that's all I have to say about some of my favorite animals.
She said she hopes to be a marine biologist, but I don't think there's any